ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our Konferensi Bawah Pohon session Oktober bersama GCDC. Today we're gonna talk a really important topic that is relevant to our current situation right now, which is pandemic. In this changing situation, we need to adapt to a lot of things happen to us. However, it is very human for us to feel angry, sad, afraid, or even anxious. But if you experience an excessive anxiety, it could lead to anxiety disorder. Well, what is anxiety disorder? What's the characteristic of it and how it affects our daily function and our productivity? Well, that's the thing that we're going to talk about today with Ms. Feka, a child psychologist from GCDC, and also Maude, Roux, an occupational therapy practitioner from the United States. So without further ado, let's go to the discussion.
So first time, I'm going to ask you, how are you?
I am doing very, very well. It's a beautiful summer. I love summertime. We're very busy. It's like everybody has now come out of hibernation after COVID. And so everybody wants therapy now.
Okay, that's nice.
And so it's been very busy summer, but you know, it's a good problem to have, right?
Oh, yeah. So you already have on-site and meeting with your clients?
Oh, yeah, since last June already. Yeah, we've been open all the time. We've only been closed for about 10 weeks when COVID hit, like that March to June period. And then after that, we've been open, but it's been open half virtual, half open, you know, but our virtual clients is becoming less again. It's definitely many more people. They want to get out of the home, I think.
Yes.
You know, they just have, you know, some place to take the children to. So yes, they're busy now.
Well, it's different situation in here in Indonesia, especially in Jakarta. Indonesia have a lot of islands, and especially in the big islands in Java, we right now we have the kind of restricted time to go, like a semi-lockdown. We cannot have lockdown because due to the economical issues. So, but the struggling is not just for the economics area, but also in the mental health area. Also, same like you, because we are hitting like a great trend, a highest trend, I guess, in the last few months after we have a big ceremonial religions. It's called Idul Fitri. Especially in Idul Fitri, every Muslims, they go back to their hometown. So maybe because of after around 2 hours, they don't go to their hometown. So they decide to go, or they decide to visit each other. And after that, the trend of COVID is like rocket like that. And also we have a new variants that comes up in our country is Delta variants. Some say it is the symptoms is very easily to influence. So there's a lot of grieving news. Yeah, so it's very devastated for most of us. Yeah, so well, I'm glad that you are already doing great in your in your country.
We're fortunate, you know, we got the vaccinations going quite quickly, and so most of the country is now vaccinated, which is why our numbers are down. And the areas where there's less vaccination, that's where the numbers are still up.
Yes.
You know, so it's interesting to see how it sort of goes, you know. But I will say that because most schools in this last year has still been virtual or a hybrid program, the stress and anxiety has really increased. The kids are really impacted by this whole piece in terms of their learning. Schools are now allowing kids to repeat a school grade. That's not something that history ever had in the US, so they can repeat a school grade. Now, for some of them, that's not, a good option. It puts you back. And for others, it's like, oh, I'm going to go back to school. And if I had school anxiety before, I have more school anxiety after having been gone a whole year, so there's just the impact globally. I think we're all feeling it. And I think that's why this series is quite timely. I think also for Jakarta, to talk about stress and anxiety and talk about how, and trying to give, practical ideas about what we can do to help kids with anxiety at home.
Yes. Could you explain what is the anxiety disorder or?
So anxiety disorder, I'm going to cover in the first webinar. We're doing 4 webinars. So the first webinar, I'm definitely going to cover all the different types of anxiety. But so anxiety can take many different forms. It can take just a general sort of anxiety that the child is just never completely okay. They smile, they look happy, but they're not really okay. And then they quickly run over into a meltdown or into a frustration. It's like they're more fragile and more vulnerable to stress. And because of that, the increased meltdowns or the increased feelings of frustration becomes more, or is seen in a more progressive way. But then you also have certain types of anxiety disorders, like PTSD could be a part of an anxiety disorder.
Yes.
Then you have social anxiety disorder. You have, all kinds. So I'll be covering those anxieties in much more detail. And there are distinct differences for all. The underlying thing is that the child's nervous system is impacted by the anxiety. And it goes both ways. Anxiety impacts the nervous system, and the nervous system impacts the anxiety. So it's sometimes a chicken and the egg. Which one's going to come first, right?
Yeah.
But then in the series, I will give ideas for whether it is anxiety or nervous system. It's going to be working for everybody.
Okay. So some say that a little bit anxiety is very good for us because it makes us alert. But how can we say that it's already disturbed or become disorder?
So yes, when we talk about a little bit of anxiety in our nervous system, there's a place we call the sympathetic nervous system. And you need to be in a little bit of upregulation in that sympathetic nervous system to drive you to learn, to drive you to work, to drive you to achieve. And so it's really a good place to be. It's when that doesn't calm down, though, when it stays up there and it stays in sympathetic over-arousal, that's when it causes dysfunction. And so what we mean by that, if you see that the child becomes more frustrated than normal, if the child has more sleep disturbances than normal, if the child's feeding habits change, if the child suddenly doesn't do the same things that they did before, if they're not consistent, if they are, today they're doing okay and tomorrow the same thing, it's like, you're from Mars, so you feel like, oh my goodness, what happened to my poor kid, right? That is when it's dysfunctional. So it's when the system cannot drive it from the sympathetic arousal into calming. That's when dysfunction is there. And I'll explain that in more detail.
Okay. So who is the susceptible to get this anxiety disorder?
I think these days we all are.
Yes.
Because
of pandemic, right?
That's right. During this pandemic, we all are susceptible to this. But I think what is kids who have general developmental delay are more susceptible. Kids who have a diagnosis are obviously more susceptible, right? That goes without given. But I think what we're also seeing now is that kids who were sort of seen as achievers, kids who were seen as high functioning and they're learning hard, whatever, you see them being driven more towards perfectionism, being driven more towards overachieving. That is actually a red flag. that child is struggling with anxiety, but because he's a high performer, nobody is really looking at that anxiety. And what we must remember is that often kids who have nervous system issues, they don't know they have a nervous system issue. They don't have another body to compare themselves with. They simply see the other kids in the classroom is smiling, is happy, and they just smile and happy and go along, but they don't realize they're working harder. So this is why a lot of anxiety goes very undetected, even in kids who do not have a diagnosis or kids who are not seen as having a problem. So I'll be going a little bit over that as well. What are little signs to look for into seeing if your child is struggling with anxiety and you may not know it?
Could you give just one sign?
So one of the things are if their routine becomes disturbed. If they don't maintain the same equable routine throughout the day, and you see something sort of slipping that you used to not see before, that you must look for. That's like a little warning sign. Okay.
So what is the connection between anxiety disorder and sensory processing mode?
So sensory processing is the way that my nervous system takes in information through different senses. And so when my eyes are seeing, my ears are hearing, my body is touching, my body is moving, when I get this information, and I'm stressed, it often puts my nervous system into an overload, which increases my sympathetic arousal. So what we look at in sensory processing is which part of the profile is being overloaded. Like some kids become more auditorily sensitive in overload. Some kids become more touch sensitive in overload. Some kids just shut down and they just sit back. And they just don't become so. That's another warning sign, by the way. If you kind of look at that earlier piece we talked about, when kids do not want to be as social anymore, they hold back. They want to go more into the iPad, more into the technology. That's what are they avoiding? Because when you go out to be social, it's a lot of sensory information, right? So that's where we will talk about the differences about or the overlaps, I should say, between having a sensory processing difficulty and how stress and anxiety loads on a sensory processing difficulty, but also how anxiety can bring forward sensory processing difficulty that we did not know we had before. Right? It upsets the way that my body handles information. So if I'm a little bit sensitive emotionally and I'm feeling not in a good spot with emotional pieces, then suddenly I feel a tag in my shirt that I never felt before. But I've worn this shirt for 2 years, right? And suddenly the kid's upset about a seam in his sock where you never really thought you worried about those socks before. Suddenly the shoes don't fit very well. But it's the same shoes he's been wearing. No, he doesn't like that anymore, right? Those little pieces are the pieces that puts the nervous system in overdrive and tells you the nervous system is having a reaction to the stress. Some of that is normal. Okay. The anxiety is not normal, but the nervous system response may be normal because I have that. And I think I'm fairly functional, right? So we can all have a little bit of it, but when it becomes so much that it influences your function, your everyday life, when it influences your grades, when it influences your getting up and going in the morning, that's when it's dysfunctional.
Okay. So what is the difference? Is there any difference between children that having anxiety disorder from sensory processing disorder between adults that have anxiety disorder? Is there any difference?
If you're talking about a child who has anxiety disorder as a mental health diagnosis, right? They may not have also a sensory processing disorder. They may show sensory symptoms, but they may not have sensory processing disorder. It may be more a mental health issue, talking about things like agoraphobia, where kids don't want to leave their home, where adults don't want to leave their home. Fear of heights doesn't have to be a sensory processing piece, right? You do have some sensory symptoms, but the biggest issue is the fear and the anxiety. I'll talk more about that on the first webinar. But when you have sensory processing disorder, you always have anxiety.
Okay.
Yes.
So there is a difference between when
Yes.
a person or a children have anxiety disorder, it's become mental health issues, right? But
That's
with the
right.
children, they have sensory processing disorder, they will have anxiety
That's right.
disorder.
That's right.
Okay.
And that's the ones where people don't always recognize the anxiety. They don't always see that the child is anxious, and it's putting them into overdrive, right? So so there's a definite difference. I will talk more about that. Actually, it's good that we talked about that now, because I'll make sure I put a lot of emphasis on that.
Could you give one strategies that we can help children or maybe adults that with the anxiety disorder, but also sensory processing disorder?
It's very important to remain active. Anxiety causes me to feel in my mind like I'm just going over and over things that I worry about in my mind. And so I become very intellectual, and my body quietens. So when I become active and I use my vestibular, my movement system, to give me some peptides into my system, it causes that joy factor to come up. And so the joy can start replacing some of the overt anxiety. So keeping active is a very important piece. And now we're stuck in houses and lockdown and things like that. You have to think about, do you have stairs in your home that you can put a heavy backpack on your child's back and make him go up and down the stairs a couple of times a day with a, thump, 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 right? And that proprioceptive, which is how my joints tell me how I'm moving, and I'll talk about that when we meet. But how that stomp, 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 up and down, carrying the heavy backpack is really very calming and reassuring to the body. It makes the body calm down. And when the body calms down, the emotional also calms down, right? And that's for anybody, mental health disorder or sensory processing, that helps for anybody, okay? The other piece to remember also is that we must take care of our sleep patterns, okay? If the sleep is disturbed and I'm not getting to bed early enough, if I'm not keeping to a structure. Now with COVID and lockdown, many people's structure is very disrupted, because it's just not the same routine of going to school and coming back. The routines are not there. Upsetness of routines is actually a big contributing factor to anxiety. So even though you're at home, see what you can do to maintain a structure for the child. Make sure they eat at the same time, eat their lunch at the same time, eat their dinner at the same time, go to bed. After dinner, don't do very big alerting activities like movies and things. Calming activities. Slow down the lights in their house. Put some slow music on, music that calms the body, and get the child ready. It's also good for adults, we're all carrying stress, So between routines and putting in physical activity, you are going to do a lot already for anxiety.
Well, it also reminds me with my own experience. I had COVID early this June.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And all of my family, 9 of us, got COVID. But luckily, we've been arranged by our government hospital that they took care of us. They took us to some facilities and some hospitals. So I agree with you with that strategies, because at that time my body is very weak, but I've given the routine to still eat, they send us the food, they send us the supplements to and vitamins. They ask us to go down from our unit to just move and take around in our facilities. That's really make us not very well, I think maybe depressed, yeah. So because we are in the facilities that we cannot see others, we cannot see our relatives, even though our relatives send us food or send us loves. But your strategies and your say that we have to do activities, I think it's really can be applied in all of people that having COVID, whether they are in home or in their isolations or whether they are in hospitals, because there is nothing to do, right? So the importance when we are moving, we also give signals to our body that we are now safe, right? Because if not, the anxiety, the anxious, it comes because of the news, because of we can see in the numbers of COVID case like that, it becomes anxious more. So your strategies is really can be applied not only with people that already have anxiety disorder or already have sensory processing disorder, but also can apply to people that is in COVID right now.
That's right. No, I think anxiety is prevalent for all of us. It really is. And what definitely has happened is that everybody's structures have been sidelined. You know, nobody's structures really stayed exactly the same. Now, luckily for us as human beings, we find an adaptive place, you know, and we can adapt to so many different horrors that happens in this world today. And thankfully, we have that resilience as a human being to have that. We just have to make sure that our vulnerabilities don't overtake our strengths, you know. And part of putting the structure back in place, part of doing physical activity is building the strength to ward off our vulnerabilities and so that the vulnerabilities don't overtake, because if the vulnerabilities overtake, that is when anxiety totally increases. Okay. So we must talk about kind of what that could look like when we do the webinars. And then, you know, just give you multiple ideas and just stay practical about what it is that we mean. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Maude, for your simple but very inspiring. I get a lot of idea for me and also for our clients, for my children's, especially to handle this COVID together for us, because in the middle of unfinished pandemic of COVID, we are still living not recognized or not, under fear or under insecurity of our own safe and health, right? So we still have to maintain our healthy physical, but also our mental health.
And your mental health comes from your body.
Yeah,
it comes from your body. The research is so clear now. So many in trauma world is exploding in research, and it's very, very important to start thinking about that our body holds the score, as Bessel van der Kolk says.
Yes, I like
that our body holds our tension. Think about when you get tight in your stomach, how you don't want to eat, you know, or you want to eat too much, but you're changing your patterns. The body tells you, you know, you feel tension in your back because you're in front of this computer all the time, you know, and you feel your body tells you there's tension. We must, and one of the things I just reminded myself now is that I want to talk about interoception and give you an idea about a body scan, to keep scanning into your body how it's feeling right now. And it's something you can also do with the kids.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Maude, for having this time sharing with us. And we hope that by this information, we can also share awareness and information to make more people know more about the anxiety disorder. Yeah. So do you have any last statement for us?
No, I'm just looking forward to it. I think it's a very timely topic for us to talk about anxiety and sensory processing. And I just want the world to heal. I just want the
Yeah,
world to heal because I think it's not just now. People are worried about the future.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's COVID now. What's it going to be 5 years from now, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And I think we need to strengthen ourselves into how we're going to use this opportunity to help us to be more secure when this may happen again in the future.
Mhm. Okay, thank you so much,
Thank,
Maude.
thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Bye.
see you soon.
Bye.
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 Wow, it is a very insightful discussion. Thank you, Miss Feka and Maude Roux, for a great conversation. And we hope that you guys enjoy and got so much information from this discussion. You also can share this information to your loved ones. And stay tuned to our next konferensi Bawah Pohon. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. Bye!